Hey there, everyone. I want to talk to you about the word despite because it's a word that causes a lot of trouble for writers. Okay, so first off, let's talk about the meaning. We use the word despite when we want to show that something is true or something happens even when we don't want it to be true or when we don't want it to happen. So for example, despite studying really hard for my test, I failed. I didn't want that to be true, but it happened. So despite studying hard, I failed. The other thing you need to know is that it's a preposition, and that's where we get the trouble. Prepositions require nouns after them. A noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. So after any preposition, you always need a noun, right? Like if I say in, afterwards I'm going to use a noun. So in the house, on the table. Around the corner, between my eyes. I always need a noun after a preposition. Despite is the same thing. So despite my hard work, that's a noun. So let's look at what I'm talking about. Despite, there's the word, that's the preposition. And then we have a few options. So here I wrote my hard work, my hard work. Well, technically the work is the noun, and you can always put, adjectives before nouns. Whose work? My work, my hard work, my hard work. Despite my hard work, I still failed the test. Or despite the easy test. The test is the noun. It was an easy test. Despite the easy test, I still failed. Or despite studying a lot, I failed. This is a noun. You might be asking, what? How is that? This is called a gerund. And gerunds are technically nouns. They look like verbs. It's basically a verb plus an ing, and it acts as a noun. It's an activity. So it's a noun. So this is where I see students having the most trouble, is when they try to use a verb after the word despite. So they'll say something like, despite I studied hard, I failed the test. You can't use I studied hard. You can't even say despite study hard. You have to use a noun. You can't have a clause. Okay, I study hard. That's a clause, a subject and verb. You can't have that. It can only be a noun or a noun phrase, but no subject and verb, just a thing, okay? So, despite studying hard, despite being awake all night, I still failed the test. You can't say despite I was awake all night. Despite the test happening in the morning, I still failed it, even though that's my best time of the day. You can't say despite that the test happened in the morning, or despite the test happened in the morning. You gotta use a noun after it. And the key is that if you're using a verb, make it a gerund. That's it. That's all you gotta do. So let me review with you. Despite plus a noun, or despite plus a gerund. Those are the only two options you have. And then of course, after that, put a comma and then the rest of your sentence, which is going to be a subject and a verb, a complete sentence. So just to be clear, despite my hard work, that's a noun. I failed. That's the rest of my sentence. Despite studying hard, that is a gerund or a gerund phrase. I failed. That's the rest of my sentence. So that's how you can use despite. Now let me give you a tip. Despite is the same as saying in spite of. And guess what? The word of is another preposition, so it follows the same rule. After in spite of, you can only use a noun or gerund. So here we are. In spite of plus noun or gerund. Despite plus noun or gerund. So you can choose And then, of course, after that, comma, and then your main point, the subject and verb, the whole point of your sentence. One last thing you can do is say, despite the fact that, okay? Despite the fact that. Now this one's where I think we get confused. This is not a preposition. After that, you need to have a clause. So you need to have a subject and a verb. Okay, that's the important thing. So you can say, despite the fact that I studied really hard for that test, comma, I failed. So here we go. Despite the fact that I studied hard for that test, I failed. Please just be careful with despite the fact that. That's when you need a subject and verb. And then after that subject and verb, which I have right here, I still need a comma at the end of that. And then my point, my main clause, my subject and verb, which is the point I'm trying to make. And that's it. So if you want to use even though, although, though, those words work great too. They're not prepositions. Despite and in spite of are, that's the only thing you got to watch out for. Okay, so how about you? Try a sentence to complete this. Despite the fact that this video was really short, or in spite of, or despite, something about this video. What do you want to say? All right, I hope this helped you. Bye-bye.